So when speaking about female scholarship, especially within the Senegambian region, this is something that I've written extensively on in my book, Beyond Bilal, Black History in Islam, which I'll post here. I've done a lecture on the topic called Daughters of Fatima, which is incorporated in the book. And personally, it's I am a testament to the importance of female scholarship in Islam, because the person who I studied Quran with, who taught me how to read and write Arabic, who I memorized the first juz of Quran with, was the daughter of Sheikh Tijani Sise. Her name is Sheikh Aisha Sise. So similar to Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, who when he was beginning his journey, he was sent to his grandmother's house to begin her studies. For many of us in the Senegambian region, women are as much of an authority figure and a role and play an important role in scholarship as men. And so Sheikh Ahmed Bamba is interesting. And there's two things actually I want to point out when we speak about Sheikh Ahmed Bamba's relationship with his mother and the female scholarship within the Muridiya specifically and within the Senegambian West African tradition in general, is that firstly, Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, for example, it wasn't just his mother. It was his grandmother who was the principal teacher and figure in his life growing up, because she was an authority figure within her own right. Her name was Sohna Astuwalo, and she also has a tomb built for her. She also has an annual pilgrimage. It's not as big as her daughters, but it's still similar. And she was a sheikha in the Tijani Tariqa. And she gave birth to Mam Jara. She had her own madrasa. She had her own village. And I talk about this extensively in my book, where she would teach thousands of students, male and female. And she was known as an expert in Maliki fiqh. And so Mam Jara was a student of hers. And so her and her brothers and her sons were the first teachers of Sheikh Ahmed Bamba. He began the Quran with his grandmother, then he studied with his grandmother's brother, Tafsir Ndumbe, and then his mother's brother, etc. And then his mother passed away during that time. And then we see that the first poem that he writes is this poem that Professor Ware quoted from, which is Sindidi. And he writes it as a gift to his grandmother, because she had given him a prayer, which is a very powerful prayer in the Tijani Tariqa called Hizbu Saif. And he used to recite it as a young child. And then when he wrote this poem, he gave it as a gift to his grandmother. And he said, all of the spiritual benefits of Hizbu Saif are in this poem. And then within the poem, he prays for his mother. And then we see that because he grew up in an environment of female scholarship, he continues that with his daughters. And I've written extensively on their biographies. I have an article called Female Saints and Scholars. I'll post the link in the comments. But also in my book, I speak about them. But he has daughters such as, Fatja Mbake, who's his first child, and who's the closest of all his children to him. And it is said that nobody resembled Sheikh Ahmed Bamba in physically and in character as much as she did. Then she also has Sohna Muslima, Sohna Mu'mina, Sohna Maimuna, and all of them go on to play major roles. Each one of them, like their father, go on to establish their own towns and villages, build their own mosques, have their own schools. Some of them, for example, write or translate traditional Arabic texts into Wolof poetry for young people to be able to memorize and understand the religion. Others, such as Sohna Musli, became agripreneurs, like they become very, very serious entrepreneurs to the point that they become millionaires. In the independence of Senegal, all of the cloths and all of the tablecloths and decorations used were from the factory of one of the daughters of Sheikh Ahmed Bamba. And she was one of the first women to receive an Order of Merit from the Senegalese government due to her service in the agricultural sector and in the business sector, as well as establishing madrasas, building mosques, etc. And what's also interesting, I feel, with the women in Sheikh Ahmed Bamba's life and the way he empowers them, is that their empowerment comes through African traditional culture and Islam, and not in them leaving it. And the narrative that's being pushed now, especially in West Africa and in many places, is that for women to be empowered, for women to fulfill their potential as women, they have to abandon African tradition and they have to abandon the Islamic tradition. All of the daughters of Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, as well as his mother and his grandmother, were all in polygamous relationships, for example. They were all co-wives, number one. All of them maintained crazy amounts of respect and devotion for their husbands. All of them did housework. All of them were as much as they used to be bosses in the world and build mosques and go and give lectures, they were as happy about that as they were in saying that they were cooking and they were cleaning and they were looking after their homes in the way that traditional African women are supposed to or were expected to. And they didn't see any of that as something that belittled them. They see that rather as something that empowered them. And there's an interesting study on this by a friend of mine, Professor Joseph Hill. He writes a book on female religious leaders in the Tijani Tariqa, and it's called Wrapping Authority. And in it, he says, for example, he gives this study of things that in Western feminism, for example, will be seen as things that oppress women, are used as tools to empower women in this religious Senegalese setting. So, for example, he gives the example of cooking. Women, because they were the ones that had the ability to feed the community, they were the ones that produced the food that everybody ate. They saw them being in the kitchen and cooking for people in events as something that empowered them rather than something that belittled them. And we see this in the case of Sheikh Amadou Bamba's daughter, Sohna May, who goes on to become the main figure in the celebration of Laylatul Qadr in Touba, which is like the 27th night of Ramadan, because she begins the celebration by cooking for her older brother, Sering Fallu. Sering Fallu was the Khalifa. She comes to him with 2 chickens that she's cooked and gives it to him, and he prays for her and he says, may it increase every year. From there, she went on to supply not only food, but then organize conferences, organize poetry recitations, and to the point where anyone that says Laylatul Qadr in Senegal now, your mind always goes to Sohna May. She became the major figure behind the celebration of Ramadan in Touba, but it started with her service in the traditional African way, and then that service led to her establishing what she established. And so all of them, I feel it's a very interesting point that the things and the aspects of Islamic culture and West African culture that people always seem to say oppress women were used by these women as tools to empower themselves and to empower other women. And they weren't seen as negative, they were seen as positive. And so they have a very good contribution to culture. For example, Mam Jara, everyone talks about the importance of Mam Jara, but whenever you hear anything about her, it's always about the relationship that she had with her husband, the relationship that she had with her family, the way she was as a wife, the way she was as a mother, the way she was in her house. And any women that get married within Senegal, they always tell them, look at Mam Jara as a role model to how to live your marital life, etc. So I think all of these things are interesting in the sense that it's a form of anti-colonial resistance that we use figures such as Mam Jara and the daughters of Sheikh Amadou Bamba as females, as symbols of female empowerment, due to them sticking to tradition and not opposing tradition.